Previously, people would think that education is just about imparting knowledge, but we all know and are very well aware that education is far beyond that. When you invest in the life of a student, you're not just investing in giving them the knowledge and the information that they may need to kind of build up their knowledge bases and develop an understanding of the world. You're investing yourself into understanding who they are, how they're going to evolve into being adults within the society. You're looking at investing into their moral development, into their social development, into their emotional development, their cognitive development. There's so many dimensions. And so you end up investing so much of your own self into that whole process that it can become very challenging at times. It is very rewarding also, but it brings with it enormous difficulties, because there is so much value providing the warmth, providing the love, the care, and the attention, because children are coming and spending extended periods of time in the schools with the educators, with the teachers, with the principals, the administrative staff, everyone. And when we are looking at emotional well-being, it's very important for us to understand that it is the emotional aspect of what is going on within the teacher, within the management, which would also affect how teaching is happening within the classrooms, how decisions are being made, uh, what is the classroom environment that is developing, what is the kind of school climate which is evolving, how is the educators well-being impacting the students well-being. It's all very much interconnected. So yes, oftentimes we've talked about for us to start looking at social emotional skills also for the educators, so that they can take care of themselves while they're imparting such valuable life skills, such valuable addition to the life of a child. And I think what has also happened, especially if you take the recent times into context, the entire situation where learning has shifted to online platforms, I think the pressures have increased even more. The roles have become far more fused. The boundaries have become very blurred between what was the workspace, what is the home space. There is a lot of stress of navigating these new platforms. Yes, we are all talking about how for a student it may be difficult, but I think it's also equally, perhaps even more challenging a lot of times for the teachers who are attempting to ensure that the students who are receiving the information are getting it in the best way. They're being able to deliver content in ways which are engaging, in ways which will ensure that the students do not feel that they are being left behind or they're not being able to understand content. And that's not easy, because this is an unprecedented situation in so many multiple ways. In fact, when surveys have been done recently, teachers have been asked that, what are you feeling? These are surveys which have happened in the United States, in Australia, some even in India. Teachers often talk about how they're experiencing a rise in anxiety, that oftentimes they're very fearful and skeptical about, am I doing the right thing here? Am I taking the right kind of measures? Am I putting across the information in the right kind of way? Are my students being able to internalize the right information, the right values, ethics that we want them to internalize? A lot of them have reported talking about that they feel overwhelmed, because there is suddenly, you always had a certain responsibility, but that responsibility has gone up manyfold. And they're not just responsible for the students that they're working with, they also have families in their own homes, they also have their own children. And we know virtual learning is very difficult, so they also have to find ways to ensure that they're being able to balance out that role, that they're doing adequate justice to the responsibilities that they have towards their own family members. And that's making it very, very difficult. And somewhere it also ends up impacting moods a little bit. The stress levels have gone up, and it requires not just 100% involvement, it in fact requires 200% involvement. You have to keep on doubling the efforts that you're having to put, and that is very draining and can really impact us. We have to understand that emotions as a result really matter, because it is the emotional well-being of a teacher which would determine the kind of attention that they are being able to pay, how they are being able to engage with the students, the ways in which they're being able to make decisions. Because we all know that if you're not feeling emotionally in a balanced state, in a more relaxed headspace, emotional hijacking can happen to the brain. Your creativity, your flexibility of thinking can get very compromised rather easily. And as a result, it can affect your decision making, it affects your relationships as well, wherein sometimes, because you are in the throes of extreme emotional experiences, you can end up either feeling or actually creating some alienation, sometimes towards the students, sometimes towards your own colleagues. Sometimes you end up feeling disengaged from your own family members. But if you are able to navigate those emotions in a slightly better way, you can ensure that you're creating the right kind of safe space, not just for yourself, but also for the students that you're engaging with. And this could ensure that the impact that it has on the relationships that you have with the students, that you have with the parents, that you have with your own family members, are taken care of in the best way. At the end of the day, the emotions that you're going to be going through will have an impact on your health, your overall sense of well being. It's your positive emotional state which will help you develop the kind of hardiness and resilience that is needed in order to navigate through these difficult times that we're all going through. Because coping and adjustment requires us to be able to feel grounded, and that grounding cannot happen unless we can maintain our emotions in some sort of a balanced space. And as a result, in order to maintain your performance, in order to ensure that the stressors that you're going through do not lead to burnout, which typically you end up seeing in the form of whether it's emotional exhaustion, feeling that you're not being able to accomplish your personal goals, that does not set in, and you're able to regulate your own self in a better way. What we want is that we need to start working towards enhancing our own emotional skills, especially in today's time, because we are in a collective and yet we are living in these silos right now within our own home spaces where we are working individually. So a lot of responsibility rests on us as individuals as well. We need to find ways to create effective support systems as well. We need to come up with unique ways in which we can engage with other people, whether it's our peers, whether it's our family members, neighbors, to be able to ensure that our emotional health is maintained in the best way. So the question that we want to ask ourselves is, what is it that we really want to feel? And if I were to ask any one of you, I think the kind of adjectives that would emerge would be, I want to feel happy. I want to feel inspired. I want to feel valued. I want to feel supported. I want to feel effective. I want to feel respected. But how do you move towards creating these feeling states? How do you move towards ensuring that these kind of positively toned adjectives are what start characterizing your feeling state? What is it that we need to do that will allow us to be able to maintain this emotional state? And the simplest answers actually can oftentimes be the best answers. I'm going to try and elaborate on some of the things which can be really helpful in maintaining an individual state of well-being, which I think really contributes very significantly towards the emotional state that people are going through, particularly in today's times. I think the first and foremost, most important thing is that we need to be willing to start talking about things. We have to become open towards sharing, asking, and understanding what is it that is going on. We always harbor this hesitation within our minds that if I share something, it would be interpreted in a certain way. I may get judged by it. I am playing this certain role. I need to project a certain image. And as a result, I need to ensure that, I don't come across as say X, Y, or Z. If I am a teacher, I may believe that I need to always be in control. I need to always come across as someone who is very gathered, collected, well turned out, has her entire thought process completely in place, or I have all the answers to the questions. But I think sometimes, especially in these times, it's very important for us to understand that each and every one of us, regardless of what professional space we are operating in, is experiencing very, very varying emotional states, things that we have perhaps never gone through. And it's very important for us to be able to accept these emotional states. We need to be willing to embrace the fact that, yes, there are moments where I'm going to feel somewhat out of control. There will be moments where I will feel a little more anxious than usual. There will be moments where I will feel overwhelmed. But if I'm feeling feeling these things, and I'm going to try and keep on hiding them, containing them within myself, hoping that they will just disappear, that may not always work. It's important for you to start becoming open by sharing, talking, discussing, that you can on what is going on within you. You also start developing an understanding that you are not alone in that journey. You start recognizing that people around me are also experiencing these varying emotional states, and that I am not the only one who is having the struggles that I am going through. This is something which allows us to feel a little less a little less anxious, a little less apprehensive, because you in that strange collective which is forming somewhere, there is also that feeling of belonging. And that belonging, even though it is happening in a negative context, still allows us to feel a little more relaxed, that I am not on my own. It takes care of that loneliness within that experience, and so it is very important to share. And how would you share unless you are not building support systems? Building up those support systems is very critical. We have mostly relied on, either our family members or, some of our close friends. But I do believe that even as professionals, it's very important for us to come together as a community to create a peer support system which can work very effectively in navigating situations. Because what a peer group will be able to understand, a friend or a family member who is not operating within that space may not always be able to fully grasp. And I feel that, schools managements can play a very, very large role in this element, where they can encourage the building of these peer support networks, a phenomena which is very prominent, especially outside India, where teacher groups are there, management groups are there, where they talk about their own experiences and they try to problem solve together, gain perspective together, learn to figure out different ways in which the same situation can not just be looked at but also work through. So I think that is something which is very, very important. The third element, which is extremely critical in this regard, is also to become more aware of what is it that is going within you. In the rigmarole of our daily lives, when we are rushing from one activity to the other, like I said, the boundaries are blurring. So there are so many more things that we are having to take care of, that we do not even take a moment to slow down, a moment to pause and try to figure out what is it that is happening to me. It is very essential that you try to find spaces, times where you can focus on you to try and understand what is it that is going on within you. If you have better awareness of your own internal states, your own internal thought processes, only then would you be able to work towards modifying them, changing them, embracing them. Whatever you may need to do with them can only happen once there is a better understanding. And for that, you need to start being in that moment, becoming more present, more grounded in the reality that surrounds you today, focusing on what is there in the here and now, pulling yourself back from what may be troubling you about the future or sometimes even about the past, and constantly trying to remind yourself of, I am in this situation right now. What is happening to me? Let me understand that, define that, and then find the best way to work with it. That is what will always be helpful and ensures you to maintain a state of calmness, and also allows you to develop an empathy towards first your own self, because it's your understanding of your own self which you will then be able to communicate with others, and people will be able to understand where you're coming from. An associated element as a result also becomes learning to put in boundaries in place. I think we always hesitate in saying a no, in saying that this is something that I cannot do right now. Somehow we all have this a tendency or a need to find a way to keep solving for all the problems or all the situations which come our way. And that can sometimes become very, very overwhelming, and it can really pull us down because the pressure can become very immense. It's very essential that when you are developing an awareness of what is happening to you internally, if you can recognize that there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of stress, it's something which is disturbing you, disrupting your moods, affecting your well-being, then you need to find a way to be able to also learn to draw those boundaries, learn to say a no, learn to switch off. I think that's something which is often very, very missing. We are very hesitant to switch off from our gadgets, switch off from, connecting with people or connecting with our work, because we feel as though something really drastic and wrong is going to happen outside. But honestly speaking, even if you learn to switch off for a couple of hours, it does nothing. The only thing it does is it allows your mind to get that mental break from being constantly involved and engaged with the outside world. It allows you to be able to create that break for your own self, which is very, very essential. Because how do you recharge yourself and how do you restore your reserves of energy, which are going to get utilized again the next day in engaging with students, engaging with teachers, engaging with your work, engaging with your home place? You need some things, some activities which are going to be able to slip in more easily and smoothly into your routines, which allow you to be able to regenerate your own reserves of energy. And for that, you will have to start very consciously cultivating, creating slots and times where you can do things that you love. Whether you do that early in the morning, whether you do that in the latter part of the day, or you find a way to squeeze in a little bit of time during the middle of the day, but you need to make an active effort towards that. Yes, you will need the support of people around you. Your family members need to step in. That does not always happen automatically, especially if you've been taking on so many roles. They would have also become complacent, and they would have realized that you're able to take on those roles. So they may not necessarily be proactive in saying that we will step in here. But it's important for you. If you need to take out some time for yourself, you start pushing the people around you to also take on more things from you. And you learn how to refrain from taking on everything onto yourself. Could it create a conflict? Maybe. Will it necessarily create a conflict? The answer is no. Because if you start communicating and sharing the impact the pressures are having on you, trust me, everyone would be involved and concerned about your well-being, and we would be willing to put in the efforts that they need to in order to support your own sense of well-being and your health. So that is something which is very, very important. I think it's also important to become very compassionate towards your own experiences. We have to learn to be first kind to our own selves. It's okay for you to feel fatigued, and it's okay for you to feel exhausted and tired as though you're completely on the edge. It's okay for you to not want to get out of the bed on some of the days, and it's okay for you to feel the anxiety building up about how the things are going to pan out. We need to try and become okay with the emotional experiences we are having, because that is going to be the first step towards building our own resilience. We can't negate or reject the fact that yes, we may sometimes be struggling, and it's going to be our ability to do this which will allow us to manage ourselves much better. In the end, we want to keep on orienting ourselves towards a more positive, a more optimistic state of mind. And the only way that can happen is if we start looking at things, um, not just from the point of view of what is going wrong, but if we are able to start identifying what is it that could potentially go right. When we start reframing the ways in which we are looking at things, thinking about things, when we start developing gratitude and maintaining the gratitude for the kind of experiences, for the kind of privileges that we have, it's only then that we can cultivate a lot of optimism and positivity within us. But again, none of it would happen unless you focus on awareness of your own self, awareness of your emotional states, your thoughts, your feelings, your belief systems. That is something which is very important. And before I move towards the end, I think the last element that I would really emphasize on is to learn how to start focusing on what is it about the situation that is in my control. When we are looking at situations, we often get stuck with aspects which are not always in our control. They are very much outside of our areas of influence. When we get stuck with those aspects, that's when we start feeling that things cannot be changed. We will not be able to manage ourselves or our emotional states well. It's very important to keep on trying to direct your attention towards the elements which you can control and focus on those, and try to get support systems in place through which you can navigate those situations in a better way. At the end of the day, What's most important is for you to recognize that your emotional well-being is of utmost importance. If you are fine, only then would those people who are around you be fine, whether it is your family members, whether it is the children that you're working with. For you to be able to keep supplying to the emotional needs, the psychological needs, of the students that you're working with, you need to be in the best mental, emotional space your own self. So you have to start prioritizing yourself, focusing on yourself, and taking care of yourself. Because if you start doing that, you will be able to do a lot more and be a lot more involved with what is going on with your students' lives as well.
Okay, so just to quickly make a point, I personally feel because we are very focused network towards schools and leaders, and I'm sure you know this, Kamna. I personally feel there's one area, sadly, in the COVID time, which was very, very neglected, was that somehow we missed out on our own well-being as a teacher, I would say. So I think it's a very, very good session with respect to, and I think now I'm opening up the house for a Q&A, maybe an individual question, or as I said, a leader can ask a question for their team members. But the idea is that we actually take care of their well-being, which is a very, very important aspect. Somehow we all have missed out that a teacher who is putting his or her 200%,
Mhm.
sometimes they forget about their own well-being. We are still concerned about our students at the end of the day. Roshni Khatri, your question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sir.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Ma'am, it is indeed a very mind opening session, and it was really good to hear such valid points, especially in this pandemic, COVID, being teachers, giving so much. And we do feel at times that we've reached to a stage of burnout.
Mhm.
Having said that, what do you think, ma'am, according to you, as a teacher, as an individual? At times, it's just not possible for us to be very open on how are we feeling with
Mhm.
the institution or with the authority figure. We somehow try to hold back and keep on saying yes, yes, yes. We can't simply say no to them
Mhm.
because of obedience that we have in psychological terminology.
Mhm.
So, how do you think that we as educators or teachers should try to put our point forth to the institution or to the leaders or to the management?
Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Khatri. It's a very valid and a very valuable one. I think it's always very difficult for us to communicate and share our experiences, even our distress or our inability to do something with people who are in positions of authority. I think that is something which is true for people across the board, regardless of what area they may be working in. I completely understand where you're coming from, but like you said, there is always a way in which some element needs to be communicated about what is going on with you, which would be something that your management can understand. I don't think it's about us turning around and completely saying a no and refusing to do the roles or the duties that one may have, but it's about trying to reach some sort of an understanding where one can communicate where is the problem emerging from. Because what you're looking for is a solution from the authorities that may be within the school, that what could be the best way to navigate that situation, get the outcome that they're also looking for. Because at the end of the day, you too want what is best for the children. You too want to ensure that their education does not suffer, that they are getting the right outcomes at the end of the day. And in order to ensure that, what becomes very essential is to find some way of communicating the challenge that you're facing, instead of turning around and saying that, okay, this just can't happen. I think that the problem emerges more when the individual is getting stuck in their own mind that this is something that I just can't do. It's becoming too much for me. I cannot handle this. And when that thought is getting stuck in your mind, then you're not being able to even express where the problem is. And so I believe that what is very critical is to find a way to find at least one person within the system, and I'm sure there would be at least one person within the system who you can reach out to share, okay, yes, I know this needs to be done. I feel overwhelmed by this. I know that it has to be done. So I'm not saying that I won't do it, but I need to develop a way in which it can be done, which in a way that is comfortable for me. So how do I go about it? And how do I communicate it to the authorities in a way that it won't be misunderstood? Our problem is more that when you are going to express, you don't want to be misunderstood as being the person who does not want to take on responsibilities, and as a result you would be hesitant in sharing. And so your caveat needs to be to say that I want to do this, but I need help in figuring out how to do it because these are the challenges that I expect. So I think if you can develop that approach, it would be helpful. Plus, it's also important to understand that when you're changing your communication pattern, the response from the other side may not always be the most positive immediately. It takes time to develop the right kind of pattern and communication. So you may have to go through that cycle a few times before you're able to reach the right kind of dynamic and communication within that relationship. But it's certainly possible, and we must try. If you don't try, then it's a bigger problem. You must try to communicate in some way.
Ma'am, I completely agree, and I was so happy to hear to your answer to the question that I stated. Cause since childhood, I've been very proactive in raising my concerns. If I have a problem, I'm going to immediately bring it to address. I never try to repress my thought or suppress for any reason. But cause of that, at times, like in fact, many a times, I've been in a catch-22 situation wherein things have become very very difficult, but still successfully, because of the power, the inner power, maybe probably the kind of upbringing that I had in my childhood days from my father especially, I've grown out to be a very very strong woman. And I still stand for what I feel is not correct. And so I just wanted to have your stamp on it, that is it the case that I as an educator or a teacher, I know it's like for all of us, but we do at times hesitate and try to pull ourselves back, that what are people going to think about us, what impression will that carry, and so more. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I have been getting few questions on the chat window as well, so I'm just picking a few of them. One is from Miss Rashmi, which I think she has put in on an open chat as well. How to keep ease around as a leader in the times when performance online and the financial crisis is much more necessary. This is, I mean, it's a factor which is compelling your, say, example, your external ecosystem, I would say, right? How to keep ease around as a leader in the times of these distress, I would say. These are the distressing factor, financial and performance online.
It's a very difficult one to kind of maintain your calm in such a situation, especially if you're the leader, which means that you're also taking responsibility for what is going on in the lives of the people that you are working with. I think it comes with its own challenges, and I think what's very important is to find your own support system in that situation. It's very important that whatever pressures are coming onto you, you need to be able to have the right people around you whom you can share your own experiences with, discuss the kind of distress you may be experiencing. That's something which is very, very essential. I think it's also important for us to recognize in these moments that the pandemic is here. Yes, there are financial challenges. There is a crisis that we're all in the midst of, but one, we're all in it together. So this is something which is very important at the back of our mind. I think the second aspect that is also important to keep in the mind is that this is also a time which is going to pass. This is not going to be our reality forever. And having that guarded optimism in place is something which allows us to be able to keep functioning in the roles that we have to. Because you're absolutely right that as a leader, as the one who's going to be responsible for so many other individuals, people are going to take their cues from you. So whatever it is that happens within you internally, if it starts reflecting and showing in your demeanor externally, it's going to create a lot of panic. And which is why your support systems make a huge difference, because if you are taking care of your distress, it won't get expressed in these situations where you have to take that leadership role. and you will be able to maintain a calmness around it. I think it's also very important to be very proactive in taking feedback and keeping a check on what is happening with the people that you're working with. Having, you know, a pulse on what is going on with the people that you're working with will always help you to be able to plan and prospectively look at what could be potential challenges which may come up in the future. That would allow you to feel a little more in control, and it would allow you to be able to feel somewhat more relaxed, that, you know, you at least have some sort of a handle on what could be potential outcomes, and there is some strategy which is in place. Those could be some of the things which would be very helpful in this situation.
Fair point. I was requesting everyone to possibly come and ask your question in person, but now I'm getting more questions on the chat window. So I will still reiterate my request, which is to please come and ask your question by yourself. That will help. However, I'm just taking up question from Ms. Suma. Nowadays, parents are very demanding, even though they know the capability of their child. They pressurize teachers to get the good result. How to make them understand? This is more of an agony's aunt
Uh,
session.
but you know, these are the very aspects which can become very stressful, because I think you know, you're constantly being bombarded with the same kind of situations, and I think that becomes very overwhelming. If it was a one-off experience, it would be easy for us to navigate it and to be able to put it on the side that, you know, it's an aberration and it does not impact me as much. But I think you know, we need to try and understand that, you know, why is it that the parents are getting this anxious. The reason that they are also becoming as pressing in their desire to find a way to ensure that the child is doing well is coming from their own anxiety about what is going to happen to my child's academic life, and what is going to be the next step, and then the outcome on on their future. I think parents are extremely concerned, and they feel very helpless because they do not have necessarily the information, the skills in place a lot of times to be able to ensure that the child is progressing, growing, maturing, not just academically, but sometimes even socially and emotionally and psychologically, which creates a lot of worry at the back of the parent's mind. And that anxiety gets completely projected onto the teachers, the principals, the school systems, because that is the most objectively available space where a child is expected to perform, you know, where you can measure the performance, and you can say that, you know, okay, my child is not doing well in these academics, and so that is something which is my concern. So I think that's something that we as educators need to keep at the back of our mind, that a parent's questions or their push is not just about their worry about the academics. It's coming from a lot of other spaces also, because they are perhaps feeling very helpless and lost. I think it's, if you have the bandwidth and you have the time and you can try and take an approach where you could explore to understand why are the parents becoming so worked up, and what is it that is creating that anxiousness within them, because it could vary from one family to the other. There is a possibility that you may be able to help them feel a little more relaxed and calm down, so that you know, they don't keep pushing the teachers as much. So it would require a lot of communication, a lot more engagement, and I understand that sometimes there is just no bandwidth for that also, because there's so much else which is going on. But that would perhaps be the best approach actually, if you're trying to help the parents become a little more relaxed in how they're handling things.
Mathura Prasad, I will take up other questions on the chat as well, but Mathura Prasad Pandey, your question, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Most welcome.
Madam, thank you for explaining the emotional well-being. Really, it's a good opportunity for me to ask the question, and I really appreciate and thanks to Honorable Gaurav sir for connecting all the principals, leaders, and really the making a good India, new India. This is called the new age of learning. I salute you, sir. I heads up to you. Really doing well, sir. Ma'am, this is one thing coming in my mind. In this COVID pandemic, children and the teacher both are not emotionally strong. Children are facing a lot of problem during online classes because the teachers are teaching and then giving them some assignment, homework, and the parents are giving the pressure to them to attend the online classes. But nobody is able to understand the child situation because keeping this mobile and laptop, PC for a long time and keeping this earphone continuously for 1 hour, 2 hour, even more than 4 hours. So this is really something big problem for the children to how to cope up, how to solve their this emotional problem, how to make them understand, and then physical because they are not able to do the physical activity. And when there is no physical activity, parents are forcing them to attend the class, teachers are giving them homework, means continuously their mind is under tension from the March 2020, and today it is October going on. And even I have counseled many children, many parents, many teachers also. Still I'm counseling them because the online classes are going on, teachers are trying to complete their portion, they are trying to complete the syllabus, they are giving homework. I told the teachers not to give homework to them. Okay, guide them, support them. I requested parents also not to give pressure to them because they are feeling a lot of pressure in the mind. So this is very difficult time. How to handle this situation, ma'am? How to counsel the children? This I want to understand. I request, please
Thank you so
support
much.
me.
Thank you so much for your question. I think there are a few things that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at this entire situation which has unfolded in front of us. Unprecedented times, which means it calls for unprecedented measures also. This is the time when we all need to find a way to be innovative and creative. And I think the responsibility, unfortunately, for the parents is a lot more than it has ever been. Life was very different when children would go off to the schools for about 8 or 9 hours, and then they would come back, and they would have structured playtime and structured class time, and they would be doing their homework, and they would have routines in place. And of course, that has completely changed. But I think what is very important even now when parents are working with children is, one, to help them still create that structure, but to do that in consultation with them, in conversation with them, because like you rightly said, that children are going through their own emotional experience. They have their own thoughts around this whole situation, and it's very important to try and get their perspectives as well, to help them feel a little more in control. It's also very important that parents, educators, need to keep having constant communication with the children to help them understand the situations we are in and why things are perceived the way that they are. I do believe that parents can, families can make a lot of effort in engaging children in wonderful ways, even within the house. It's not necessary that they have to be on the gadgets the whole time. Gadgets is the easiest way to, ensure that a child is busy. But actually, if you start involving children in the chores at home, if you give them more responsibilities, you allow them to take on decision making roles as well, not only would it keep them busy and away from their gadgets, but you're also giving them very important life skills. And I think that has to be the strategy, because this whole situation requires us to handle the prevailing scenario in a more different way than what we typically have. Children can't go out and play as such. Yes, a lot of parents are very hesitant in doing that, but they can certainly get involved in the play at home. There are a lot of innovative, nice, wonderful games that parents can play with their children. They can encourage them to spend some time with their children, if not every day, then at least on the weekends. There are lots of things which can certainly be done, which would be very, very helpful in navigating this situation. And I think that's something that we need to emphasize. And I think for children also, it's very important to have conversations with them where one reinforces the fact that they need to also put in efforts from their side to take care of their own well-being, and to keep themselves better engaged, and not just on social media or on their gadgets the whole time. Children are also getting equally fed up of being on the devices. I work with a lot of young people, children and adolescents, and trust me, the number of kids who say that, actually I'm done with my gadgets, I don't want to see my laptop, I don't want to see my PlayStation, has increased enormously. So they also want an outlet and a different way to be engaged. So if they work collaboratively with their families, we can certainly find some sort of a different new way of engaging together.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
I have a question. I'm picking up a question from the chat window now. Dr. Shashikala is asking this question. What can be done to teachers who are very reluctant to take any advice given to overcome the fears that they nurtured during this pandemic? I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. It's a very difficult one also, because I think a lot of it relates to individuals' own temperament and personality. And I think that uh, as being someone within the management, if you're looking at talking to someone, or even if you're looking at talking to a peer who is a teacher, and you know that there are some areas in which they could be benefited if they were to be given certain inputs, but they are resistant to it. I think the first point at which the intervention needs to happen is to try and understand where is the resistance coming from, instead of jumping into a mode of giving advice. Because what also happens is that when someone who is not too receptive to advice is given that advice, they end up feeling threatened, and they feel that they are being questioned, or their competency is being questioned, or that there is there and it can impact their own sense of self. And so the resistance a lot of times is coming from that space. I think it helps instead to give feedback, or to share inputs in ways which would be easy for the other person to assimilate and accommodate within their existing worldviews. And for that, if you have an understanding of this aspect of the resistance, that where does that come from, you can modify how the communication is made. Instead of handing it down in an authoritative manner, it may be more beneficial to engage in a more conversational style, where you're having a discussion, and in that discussion you try to put across certain aspects more as suggestions or tentative understandings on your part, things which you may have seen have worked better in those situations. And when you put it out as a more tentative suggestion, the other person may be a lot more receptive in that whole situation, than feeling that they're being forced to relook at their own viewpoints. I think that could be something that would be very beneficial in that scenario.
I'll take one more question from the chat, and then we'll go to two questions on the show of hand, which is Madhuri Arora and Archana Chaudhary after that. Ms. Pearl is asking, what all activities can be done in the school to create conducive environment for teachers to open up, because school leaders are looking towards teachers, student, finance and performance as means to achieve their profits. In the whole process, a teacher in a school is considered just a least important brick. How a teacher can maintain their self-esteem especially?
Well, I think this question has many elements associated with it. It's not just about how can teachers be helped to share and express what they may be going through, but I think starting with that point, the kind of environment that we're looking at creating with the school, it has to be both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. I think the impetus needs to come in from the management, where there is receptivity towards viewpoints from the teachers. And I think there also needs to be a push from the bottom, from the teachers, to say that we also want to be heard, and we also need to find a platform where we can share our views and our opinions. I think it's only when it's a mutual pushing which is happening to try and reach some sort of a common ground where communication can be the focus. I think that's where it's very helpful. I think a lot of times what starts working initially, at least, is finding more anonymous kind of groups or settings where people feel a little freer in being able to share and express. Creating those kind of mechanisms can sometimes be more beneficial, but in the long run, what you do want is not just anonymous conversations about what's going on or what's affecting, but being able to talk more freely and openly, and knowing that you will not be judged, and knowing that information would not be misunderstood or misrepresented is what is helpful. And that's a culture that you need to cultivate, and it starts from each and every individual who's occupying any position within the school's system. So it is equally the responsibility of every individual who's working over there to take ownership of that piece, and also be willing to be vulnerable in that space, to say that yes, could this go against me? Yes, it could, but okay, because I know that this system needs to work more effectively, for that I would need to be open to being vulnerable in that space, so that the relationships, the ties, the bonds, the psychological contract that I have with the school system becomes more stronger, gets reinforced as well. I think that's something which is very, very critical. So that's for the first part of the question. I think when you're talking about self-esteem of teachers in the midst of this entire situation, uh, self-esteem, your own sense of self, is about how you're feeling, not just externally but also internally validated about the things that you are doing, the activities, the work that you're engaged in. And I think both aspects need to come together. So for your own self-esteem, it's very important to have a very good understanding of what you're doing, what are your strengths, how well you're doing it, where are the areas in which gaps exist. And if there are certain areas in which gaps exist, then how do you try to overcome those by either having discussions or conversations with other people who exist within the system, or talking to outside external experts who can help you bridge those gaps and work on the lacunas which you think exist in how you're doing things. So that's one part of building your self-esteem as well, where you internally take that on. I think from an external perspective, it's very important that schools as systems try to reinforce the kind of um, initiatives, the kind of initiative that a lot of individuals might be taking. It's very important to acknowledge and reinforce, validate the efforts that are being put. A lot of times what happens is that when we are looking at the different roles, the different work that needs to be done, we keep on focusing on what got left or what got missed. We forget to talk about what actually got achieved. And so it's a very conscious effort that people need to start making. And I don't feel that it's just the management's role. I believe that again, it's each and every individual who works within the system, their role to keep on pointing out the good that is happening to your peers, to your juniors, to your seniors, to say that this was really nice or you did this really well. Because if you start developing that culture, it would also encourage others around you to build it. So I think these could be some of the things that can be kept in mind.
Well answered. Madhuri ji, your question, then Archana. These will be the final two questions, and then we're 10 minutes away, and I'm sure this is the time we were supposed to end this, right? Madhuri ji, your question, and then Archana, your question. Final two questions. Madhuri ji, your question, please. Else Archana Chaudhary can take up the question so that we
Yeah.
can, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Ma'am, everyday experiments are done nowadays on the sake of online teaching. I believe that because every now and then, either the teachers are asked to go for Google Meet or Zoom classes or Google Classroom or something like that. Means once a teacher is well adapted with the system, and suddenly they are asked to switch to a new system, right? And what I feel that neither the teacher nor the students are satisfied with this type of changes, frequent changes, right? So the irony part is that the principal or the administrative staff and means in concern with the parents, because they give suggestions that this is the better method which we should be implementing, where somehow the inputs which is required by a teacher to give in teaching process, that is missing, and the positivity is lost. So don't you think that something should be inculcated, or some planning should be fixed, or something should be elaborated in which manner we can switch to any other things? Like Khatri ma'am was telling that sometimes it is just impossible to say no to something although you are not well versed with it. So this is a big problem which I feel that during this online teaching which we are facing, and still the parents wants the same classroom teaching to be done in the online teaching. So what measures we can take when we are talking about these type of things? When we discuss to the student, they also say that, ma'am, now we are well versed with Google Meet, now you are switching to this, so this is going to be a problem. And even for us it is a problem, but we say no, no, it will be done, right? So what measures can be done if we are not able to say no? How to adapt those situation, or how to tackle those issues? So that is a quite problematic situation which I feel nowadays everyone is feeling.
It's very true, and I think that has been the biggest challenge in this whole pandemic. It's not just about this particular situation. I think in general, adapting to newer aspects, adapting to any kind of a change in general is very difficult. We don't like change. As human beings, we don't like change. We don't like to have to modify our ways of doing things. We get very comfortable in being in one kind of space, and any kind of transition tends to challenge us in multiple ways. And what also happens is that as we get older, as we are moving across the ages, our own flexibility, the cognitive flexibility, which is very characteristic of younger people, children and adolescents, of course that keeps on slowing down, and it reduces over time. So this is something which is a big challenge for everyone at this point in time. Adaptation to a new situation requires us to be able to build uh, uh, build some confidence that I will be able to. I think what also kind of impedes our ability to be able to adapt in that situation is that we start feeling that okay, oh my god, I don't know how I will do this. This is something that I just can't manage. Oh my god, again I'm in that space where this new change is coming. Because our own thought process, a lot of times our own emotional state has become negative towards that change, that also further contributes to the difficulty in adaptation. And I think if it's a situation where you will not be able to avoid it, it's something that you do have to work on. You can't get out of it. Then we need to start changing the narrative in our own mind. We need to start changing the kind of thought process which is coming into our own mind. We need to reframe it and start telling ourselves that I don't like this, but I know I have to go through it. So I'm going to try and take as positive an approach over here as possible. If I am struggling with it, let me try and find a way in which I can problem solve this. If I can't understand it for myself, let me talk to say X, Y, or Z, whether it's your peers, whether it's someone at home who can help me through this. Let me try and take a more problem solving approach instead of get stuck with the emotional experience of feeling either helpless or feeling very low or anxious about what I need to do. I think if you start working on that, it would be very beneficial in some of these situations.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Madhuri ji, can you hear me? Okay, final question. So I'm just going to Miss Soma Bhattacharji, and that will be the final question for the day. And then we'll say thank you to Kamna, and then we'll move ahead. Okay. Miss Soma, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you and good evening. Well, ma'am, I think I have heard you so much and
You're
I'm
not audible, ma'am.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, better. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I'm elated to be a part of this group. And thanks to Madam for her beautiful presentation. Well, keeping in mind with along with all the teachers, whether it's pandemic or non-pandemic, teachers are supposed to be the all-rounder, whether it is home or outside, and stress is a part of our journey, and we are expected to know everything. So, ma'am, before you wind off, why don't you leave us with few tips to de-stress ourselves automatically every day? Because all these factors are inevitable. Talking to the management or finding out, it works for in theoretically, but practically it does not at all work out. So we are supposed to be knowing everything, doing everything, and we are supposed to go forward. So, with that note, can you just tell us that certain few methods or tips to keep ourselves elated and at our toes and be happy and go forward? Because our mission is our children and we all love our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bhattacharya. I think, in your question also lies some of the answers. Like you said that your mission is to work with the children, and I think it's that goal, that value, which kind of provides the motivation for us to keep continuing. It's very important to maintain your sense of well-being and to be able to keep going through the rigmaroles of your lives as educators. That you keep focusing on that value system that you're looking at, the goal that you have, which is to work with children, impart them knowledge, impart them the skills that they can become good citizens of the countries wherever they will choose to reside later on. It's very important that we keep focusing on that. I think that's very helpful to keep that at the back of our minds on a regular day-to-day basis. I really believe that it's important for every individual, regardless of which profession they may be in, to learn how to prioritize their own selves. We often keep putting ahead other situations in front of us, and we can become very neglectful of our own needs. I think it's important to be aware of what your own needs are, and to keep on trying to find ways to supply to those needs. I think the third aspect is to look at creating and cultivating very solid unwinding routines for yourself at the end of the day. It's something which really works very well. Like I was saying during the course of my talk also, I do believe switching off is a very, very important aspect. We're constantly surrounded by gadgets, we're constantly surrounded by news, information, media, social media. It's important to learn to put those things aside and start looking at things like listening to music, looking at reading. If you like to dance, you do that. You need to get in some of those activities which can help your mind to switch off, because I think our minds usually don't switch off, and that keeps on maintaining the stress and the pressure. So that's something which is very important. And most of all, I think we need to find ways to start our mornings in a very good way, where you can sit down, give yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes or even if it's just 10 minutes, but to give yourself those 10 minutes in the morning at the beginning of the day. Have that slow start to your day so that you don't feel rushed, that you've got 100 things that you need to take care of. If you can even just do those very, very small things, I think it would be very helpful in the long run. I think those would be three or four things which I think if we can implement on our day-to-day basis, it would be very valuable.
Thank
Thank
you, ma'am.
you. Thank you, Ms. Soma, for your question, and thank you for a lovely answer. Ms. Kamna, thank you for taking up all our questions, and it was a pleasure having you with us. To all the, we had almost 190 people by the time, and I think it was more than that. But having said this, this is going very well. I have been personally thinking that we should have done this more often, I would say, but never laid, I would say that's the way we should approach this. So possibly we are midway in our sessions. This is the third session. We have three more to go. My request to the educators is that please ensure that your teachers, I would say anyone who you feel can get benefited out of it from your community largely, which is the schooling community, please do ask them to join in and be part of this session. For today, thank you very much, Ms. Kamna Chhibber. Wonderful having you with us. And I hope to see you possibly soon. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
And bye-bye, everybody. Have a great evening and stay safe. And do wear your mask. Bye-bye.